Welcome back to Dentistry Talks. We're joined today by Katie Traxton, marketing executive and talent agency owner. Katie has had a remarkable career, navigating many challenges and championing inclusivity every step of the way. Growing up in Chigwell as the first in her family to attend university to her fast journey into leadership, Katie has worked hard to be at the forefront of conversations around diversity, age discrimination and gender equality. She's a proud member of the Women in Advertising and Communications Leadership Group, where she works to keep inclusivity high on the agenda. In this episode, we'll dive into Katie's journey, the challenges she's faced, and the advice she has for those breaking barriers in their dental careers. Hello, welcome.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Cold.
I knew you were going to say that. We're just talking about how freezing it is. It's truly winter, I feel now.
It is.
Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
It's a cold pleasure.
It's a cold pleasure. I'm going to just throw us straight in. The word inclusivity is a bit of a buzzword. In business, in just everyday life, it's a word that people are talking about and talk about how important it is for business, for industries to thrive and be successful. What does inclusivity mean to you?
Oh, it's so interesting, that question. And also, am I allowed to become a little bit controversial?
I welcome it.
So for me, very simply, and I promise I've never answered this question exactly this way before, but inclusivity for me is recognizing that our similarities are more interesting than our Sorry, let me start again. Inclusivity for me is recognizing that our differences are more interesting than our similarities.
Okay.
And therefore, as we come together and we learn to understand each other, we can actually be better ourselves and be better as a unit than we would be just always sticking with whoever looked the same as us, spoke the same as us, had the same qualifications as us. And we need to recognize other people's differences not as a threat, but as something that enables us collectively to be better. And I think it's really difficult. And I'm going to put this out there that I think it's particularly hard for women sometimes to understand that the people around us, our colleagues, people we have the opportunity of being a team with, are there to make us better, because so often women in particular have been pitted against each other. So often there's this sense of you're in competition with one another. There's only space for one of you. Like that, it can be really hard to get into that sense of it being a safe space.
Absolutely.
Where you can make each other better, champion each other. However, what I do think is an issue in 2024 is that because in some circles, it's either become the thing you have to do or the thing that will get you ahead to say that you champion inclusivity. Whereas it used to be that there just wasn't really anyone championing inclusivity. Now you have to divide between the people who really mean it and the people who are doing it for the wrong reasons.
So that's what I alluded to, I think, in my intro, is that it's a buzzword in the sense that it's something that can be performative for some people, and then there's others who will use it as they will genuinely want to get to that point where their colleagues or their team or the business that they run stands for that and pushes out a message that screams inclusivity.
And it's so hard. In 2012, I was on a diversity and inclusion, the global diversity and inclusion committee at the organisation that I worked in, when lots of organisations didn't have diversity and inclusion committees. Yeah. Everybody on that committee cared. Now, I was speaking to a friend last week who's in another big organisation. She is on a committee for a specific part of inclusivity. Literally, there's 2 people who do everything and everyone else is doing it to put on their LinkedIn and their CV and to try and get a promotion. So although in some ways we've gone forwards because everywhere's got a committee now, the people who actually cared are far, far fewer in that example. So I think it can be really challenging. And I was actually also yesterday having lunch with someone, an international athlete, who is a member of more than one underrepresented group, who has always been an advocate for those groups. And yet he said that this year, we had businesses turning around to him and to me saying, oh no, we're not doing anything for LGBT History Month. We did that last year. Oh, well, no, we don't need a Black History Month speaker. We had one. And we're kind of going, oh my God, this is so wrong. This is as bad as when Marks and Spencer's changed their BLT to the, what did they change it to the LGBT?
Oh, yes.
And then said, oh, because we've renamed the sandwich, we're now supportive of the community and that's job done.
Happened. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because like you said, it's changed. So back in 2012, when you were part of that committee and you said everybody cared, you were kind of looking at people who were putting their foot down and trying to make a change and say this is important, and people who weren't. Now it's more that everyone is saying that it's important, but who is genuine? And that, in a way, is almost harder to differentiate between, like, how do you know that these people are genuinely pushing to represent you? Whether it's, there's all kinds of underrepresented groups, in dentistry and every industry, but that will determine for a lot of people where they work, who they socialise with, what team they want to be a part of, and for it to be so difficult to work out whether people are genuine, that this is important to them is scary, actually.
I think the only thing you can do is ask people the question why, because the fakers, they know the answer to the question what, but they don't know the answer to the question why.
Interesting.
And it's really interesting because so in 2011 I was working in international motorsport. There were not women anywhere.
That doesn't surprise me.
And in order to get a program for young women up and running, I had to do a load of research, have a load of insight, and explain why I wanted to do it. And actually, what was fascinating at the time, for anyone out there, I don't think this is probably too out of date even now, even though it was over a decade ago. In my mind, the reason there was a barrier to entry to women, like working in motorsport, forget the drivers, working in motorsport, was because they weren't doing science, technology, engineering and math subjects, right? And super interesting to dentistry. I thought, okay, this is obviously the reason. You know, they're not qualified because they're not going into those subjects. So the issue starts at school. It turned out, and we looked at 6 countries, right? GB, Italy, Spain, France, Germany and Finland. It turned out the reason was because they felt unwelcome. They actually were doing the degrees. Enough people were doing the degrees. But they felt unwelcome in the environment, so they weren't applying for the jobs. So we set up a program where they could come and they could shadow people, they could do work experience, particularly with women, and they could see that actually this was a community that they could be embedded in. Now, what's really interesting is the only way for me to be allowed to do that was for me to do the piece of research and prove that this was what needed to be done.
It was a gap.
Yeah. Nowadays, everyone's like, let's do a photo on International Women's Day. Done. Did you circulate the photo? We've circulated the photo. There's some women. and
job done.
And you're like, well, this can't be right. This is not the direction of travel that we should be going in. But this is the interesting thing, because back in those days, if someone had challenged me and said, why are you doing it? The answer is really obvious. But if you say now, why are you doing the photo? The answer is like, well, because it's International Women's Day. Okay, but why are you doing something for International Women's Day? Well, because my boss told me to. So I think that's the thing. We really need to keep focused on the why, not the what.
I'd like to just go back to the why this is such an important topic for you. And I think in our conversations prior to this, you spoke a bit about your upbringing and your university education and your career, and it'd be good just to touch on that. So you're obviously the first person in your family, neither of your parents went to university.
Well, so my mum did do a degree with the Open University in her 40s, which actually is quite
Amazing.
inspiring.
Absolutely,
like when you're a teenager at home, for her to do that. But no, officially
from
when they left school, no.
Open University, by the way, my partner did her degree with the Open University, and I went to the graduation, and it is a fantastic institution for a lot of the time women working part-time, being a mother. And there was some really nice stories. So just as a side note,
I did my MBA with the Open University.
Yeah,
no, honestly, and it was
fantastic.
So good because I was traveling at the time for work.
Yeah.
But also I met fascinating people who'd had amazing life experiences that they brought to it. I think it's a wonderful institution.
It is. So good for your mum.
Yeah. But, when do we get paid for that promo?
Yeah, that's it. Bit of a promo there. But it was unintentional. It is fantastic, and it was kind of on brand for what we're talking about, I guess. But so yeah, at that age when you were going to university, your parents had not gone to university straight from school. So
no.
There'll be a lot of people in dentistry who either find themselves in that position now or found themselves in that position when they were going through their degree. How was it for you? Was it something? Was university something that felt a bit unknown?
So, okay, it's really interesting because I can look at all different kinds of things here. One thing I would say is that while I was fortunate enough to get to go to Oxford, and there are still more boys than girls at Oxford. When you go to Oxford, you go to a college.
Yes.
And at my college, it was 50-50 boys and girls. So I never felt at any kind of disadvantage being female. And actually, of our 3 tutors, 2 of them were women.
Okay.
And one of our tutors, who I've just got to say, for anyone out there who thinks that you can't do things your way, one of my tutors, who then became the first ever Shakespeare chair of Oxford University, was younger than the other tutors. She was state educated. She was from the north of England. She was in a same-sex partnership and a woman, and she wore jeans to our tutorials. And she just literally dominated everyone.
Incredible.
And not only that, but she would communicate everything in the simplest terms because she never had a need to kind of try and assert how smart she was. She only needed to walk into the room and we knew how smart she was and how much we wanted to impress her. But anyway, that's a sidebar. The thing that was apparent to me when I first started at uni was not at my college, but at lots of the other colleges, that not only had most people's parents been to university, but a lot of people's parents had been to Oxford. A lot of people's parents had studied the same subject that they studied. That their entire path was pre-carved for them in terms of what they were going to do. And you would think that I was at a disadvantage. I was not. Oh my goodness. The freedom and how wonderful it is for your mental health, for your mum and dad to go, work hard, be nice and enjoy it, rather than this is what you should be doing, or all of your siblings have gone here, so you need to go there, or dad got a first in this, so you should be getting a first in this. That expectation is an enormous weight, and I would much rather be in my shoes. But one of the things that turned me on to working around inclusivity when I went out to the workplace was the fact that I grew up in Essex, the heartland of birds of a feather, footballers' wives, Towie, right? And I used to say to people, oh, I'm from London, just trying to kind of be geographically friendly. And then people would say, oh, are you ashamed that you're from where? No, don't worry, I'm from Essex. I'm from Essex, don't worry. Like, I clarify this. I'm really proud, it's fine. But where I grew up, it was so multicultural, like so multicultural. And all of my friends were from all different backgrounds. It was completely normal that we celebrated everyone's different religious festivals, that everybody knew how everything worked. When I went to uni, and suddenly most people were white, not everybody was white, but most people were white, I was like a little bit stunned that was how the world was, because that wasn't my world.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And my world was so nice, where everyone was mixed in together, that I then kind of wanted not to say, oh my goodness, on a point of principle or theory, everyone should be mixed in. It was more like, no, everyone should get to see the world that I've been in.
So it was almost going from being around all types of people to then the contrast to then being around a lot of people who looked and maybe acted quite similar, which is what made you think, this is something that's really important. Okay.
And also the fact that for anyone from Essex out there listening, one of my favourite places in the whole world is the Kenneth More Theatre, which is in Ilford.
Okay.
And I did amateur dramatics there way before I was allowed to. You were meant to be a grown-up, but I like snuck in with a bit of help from my mum as like the one kid when I was 14 that was needed in these productions. And when I was doing musicals, you know, the vast majority of the guys in my drama group were gay, and my dance partner was gay.
Yeah.
And again, this was another part of my world where actually I probably spent more time with gay boys than with straight boys.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to uni, and when one guy came out in our first year, it wasn't that nobody actually was out of order to him, but it was like a big story.
Yeah. What people were talking about.
And in my world, it wasn't a big story at all.
Yeah.
So again, coming from all these angles, there were just things that I'd never even thought about that suddenly I needed to think about. And like I say, this world I came from where everyone just cracked on and you were mates based on how good the banter was. Like, I just wanted the world to be a bit more like that.
So after university, you applied for a job as a PA?
Yes. Yes. That classic Oxford milk round career. Yeah.
And then very quickly you found yourself in a position of leadership. So can you talk us, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's unknown.
Still unclarified.
To this day, we're not mentioning it in case someone notices.
Okay.
Yeah. So I left, and kind of, you know, I've got to say that most things that have happened prior to my career, my parents and I made up as we went along together. And then once my career started, I was just making it up as I went along on my own. But I left university, and, you know, I think Mum said, oh, we'll get the local paper. There'll be some jobs in there. And I'd gone to work at Waterstones because I've worked there during my gap year. So, you know, I had pedigree.
Yep.
And found this job in the local paper that said, you know, PA needed.
Yeah.
And people talk about these amazing salaries. And I think one of the things, now having worked internationally, that I love about my colleagues, not from Britain, is that they speak so openly about issues of humanity and money and all this stuff, right? So I will say the job was advertised for £18,000. So it was not some grand, like, investment banker salary. I thought, okay, great, I'll apply for that, you know, and I put my best trousers and shirt on, and I went in, had my interview, and I found out in the interview that it was in motorsport, specifically in a part of motorsport called rallying, which I didn't know anything about.
Yep.
But I was mad about motorsport. I'm an only child. Dad loves cars. He used to do club racing, spent weekends with my stopwatch while I wasn't allowed in the pit lane because I wasn't 18. So I had my stopwatch and clipboard by the track, you know, keeping...
Oh, I love that.
keeping my dad on his toes. And then we'd watch the Formula One, and I would ask every question under the sun, and with hindsight, clearly ruined his race experience. But he was very patient with me.
Yeah.
So I was really excited when I heard it was motorsport, and then finished the interview and I went away. And about 2 weeks later, I thought, I'm going to call up and see what's happening, because literally they've ghosted me. And I called up doing this very like, so like I've not been waiting every day for the last 2 weeks to hear what you had to say. But I was just wondering. Now I've got you on the phone. And the guy, my boss, he became my boss, is Dutch, very direct. And he went, oh, you would be a terrible PA. And I was like, cool, thanks for the feedback. And then he said, but my communications officer is about to go on maternity leave, and I've been really slack, not even recruiting for that role. What do you think? Do you want to do it for 6 months, sink or swim? Be good for your CV. And so I was like, yeah, I'm there.
Yeah.
I've never really, I don't know if it's naivety or lack of knowing, like I just wasn't intimidated by systems because I didn't know how they worked. So that whole thing of women agree to do things when they've got 90% of the skills, men agree to do it when they've 50% of the skills. I'll just agree if you give me a chance.
That's good. It's a good approach, to be honest.
I'll just be like, I'm going to work it out.
Yeah.
So I went along, took the job, sank without a trace, like no armbands, no float. I was awful. People now who know me in senior positions are like, you were a rabbit in the headlights. I save press releases I wrote in those days to remind myself how bad I can be.
I thought you were going to say to remind myself how far I've come.
How bad I can be.
Okay.
I'm not even joking. The headlines, like people should have been using them to put themselves to sleep. But anyway, so after kind of 9 months, I got okay at the job. I was actually okay at the job. I could write quite a snappy press release. I wasn't very fast, but I could write a snappy press release. And then I did my annual review. And this is something really important. I honestly believe we should all be sharing the things that we've got wrong or could have done better.
That's interesting.
Because I've learnt way more from those than the things I've got right. So I go into my annual review and I'm like, I'm quite good at this now, actually. I was self-aware about the fact I wasn't good. I can be self-aware about the fact I'm quite good now. So I was really excited. And then my boss went, oh, it's not good. And I went, this is the same Dutch guy.
Right.
And I went, oh, well, I don't understand. And he said, well, to be fair, he was like, the rate at which you've learnt the sport has been unbelievable and your output now is quite strong. But I might as well have hired a robot because you've been so focused on learning everything about how to do your job.
Yeah.
You've completely forgotten about the people.
Okay.
And I was like, right. And he said, like, you just don't have the relationships. It's not that anyone dislikes you, but like nobody likes you. In a crisis when you might need a favour, who are you going to call?
Okay. So was that a wake-up call?
Like, how do you, and I'm going, oh. So I took myself off to Costa Coffee and licked my wounds. And then after I'd done that, I thought, well, I obviously need to fix this situation. And what I would say is I'm like not a competitive person. Like you can't push me into competition, like in terms of sport, whatever. There's no like competitive juices to ignite, but I'm very competitive with myself about making myself better and better and better.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So we started the new season and there were 2 occasions on this second season, and I'm not advising this to any listeners, okay? Health warning coming, where I worked 20 hours a day for 10 days in a row.
Oh, no.
And I did this in order to maintain the quality of work I was doing, but to be able to do breakfast, morning coffee, lunch, afternoon coffee. So once, like the Vicar of Dibley, I did 2 dinners at one event to bond with the people.
Oh my gosh.
Anytime the people had time to chat, to get to know me, I was there. And it was great. These were like fascinating people. The 2 dinners was a struggle, but that was the food. The food was, I was there going, oh, not really that hungry at both of them to try and minimise the eating issue. But anyway, fast forward 9 months and my boss got a promotion. He was quite senior. He was 3 grades above me. He got a promotion for the first time in a long time. And so again, because I didn't know how systems work, I went to the CEO and I said, oh, can I apply for his job then? And the CEO thankfully admired my gumption rather than, and he went, not really, that's not really how it works. Like we have to find someone who, you know, has the qualifications for the job, has the experience. And I turned around and said, but there's 150 key stakeholders here and I know all of them. And I guarantee if you call any of them and you ask them what they think of me, they would like trust me, they would be loyal to me, they would want to work with me. Is it not easier to teach me the skills than it would be for those other people with the skills to meet all these people?
Yeah.
And I think also partly because my boss was staying in the business, the CEO went, all right. He went, all right, like have a go. And yeah, I was given this amazing opportunity to manage 3 world championships and I was 24.
Wow.
And my boss was like the biggest advocate ever.
That's lovely.
And actually I was offered a job at the same time for twice the money in another motorsport. You could probably guess which one it is given that I said twice the money. And I didn't take it because honestly, I would have been the smallest cog in the biggest operation. And instead, I had a bit of pressure, but the most enormous playground to learn every skill I could possibly need for the future of my career.
I think that, if I could just pause you there, that's a really good point you've just made.
Don't worry, sometimes I do stop speaking.
No, I do not. This is what these are for. I love the speaking. But actually, I think you've made a really good point there, which is that this sort of money versus skill element there, where you could have had a lot more money, but you went for what I can assume is a smaller organisation where you would have more of a chance to widen your skill set and talk to more people. Is that something you would encourage people to do early on in their career, to sort of prioritise the skill side over money? Obviously, if they can justify doing so. I know that everybody's situations are different, but if they can afford to do that, do you think that was key for you in your career?
Yes. For me, everything has to be long term. Never take the quick win.
Okay.
Unless you can do that without sacrificing the long term.
Yeah.
Because ultimately the skills I learned then, the experience I got, are what led to much, much higher salaries in the future. And that wouldn't have happened if I'd taken the other job. In this instance, the difference was between kind of 2 championships, 2 sports, etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, always the long term. And I think one of the challenges is, at another point in my career, I took a 40% pay cut to go from one job to another job where I didn't need to. And obviously there was a conversation with my partner at the time and he was very supportive.
Yeah.
But the thing was, I went to an agency that was just starting and there was always this underlying discussion of, yeah, but we're going to grow and you will grow with us. And I did. And in a very short space of time, I was earning more than I had been previously.
Okay, yeah.
And I'd had this amazing opportunity and I was able to watch the entire development of a business in all parts and be at the heart of it. But that was another decision I took. And yes, obviously, like mortgages and cost of living and everything else is really important. But I've still always had to support myself. And even in starting my own business, for me, it wasn't about the money. As long as I could pay the mortgage, I don't care if what I'm spending on my life is the same as it was 10 years ago. As long as I'm learning, I'm fulfilled, I'm making a difference. Yeah. Like, you're excited to get out of bed in the morning to go to work. There was one year in my career where I didn't feel that.
Okay.
And having gone from always feeling that to suddenly not feeling it, you really notice the difference. I can imagine. Like, I went to a talk with Ellie Simmons once, the Paralympian, and she said in the talk, there are those mornings where you just don't want to get up and go to bed, and go to work. Well, as a Paralympian, you just have to. And I went, I've never had one of those mornings. Well, boy, did I have some of those mornings when I took this new job.
Do you know what, I think everybody in their career will have that, and it's important because it's character building. It teaches you a different kind of skill and resilience.
Myself that.
No. I do as well, but I actually do believe it. I had a job 8 years ago. So
you don't look old enough to have had a job 8 years ago.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that, although I don't believe it, not with my crow's feet that I have had since a child. I have childhood photos I can show to confirm.
All in the design.
Yeah, I think I was one of those creepy children who just had like looks of age about them from a very young age. But anyway, that's another story. But this job I had, I was at a national newspaper, and I hated it. I had my notice in after 7 weeks. I didn't like the paper. I didn't like the work, the night shifts, it's a bit of a battery farm, sort of just churning out news stories. And whilst I look back and I think of my time there and I think, that was really not a nice time in my life, it really makes me appreciate when I do enjoy my job. So I do think, whilst I obviously don't want or advocate for anyone being unhappy, I do think that contrast, and maybe you can agree, it's given you that appreciation maybe more so. Now you can take that 1 year of your life and be like, that was not great. I really do have it good, you know?
Yeah, I think there's nothing that doesn't teach you something. There are no people that you can't learn things from.
Yeah.
And every experience will teach you something. And for sure, I learned skills, and I met a couple of people who I'm still in touch with and, you know, integral to my life.
Yeah.
And there are definitely lessons that I can pull out of it. But while nothing in life is perfect and we can all pick holes in everything, I was in a very toxic culture which had never happened before. I'd had people where not everybody gets along, you know? It's not even about being good or bad. You know, most people in an organisation will have had to do Myers-Briggs or, you know, the colour profiles of a team or whatever.
Yeah.
And I come out as like the most yellow on all those colour profiles. I'm a yellow who really likes working with very data-orientated blues.
Okay.
And that is a very happy little world.
Yeah.
So as soon as you have people who have more emotional intelligence than me, who are greens, or kind of want to like, they thrive on confrontation like the reds, I run a mile. Doesn't mean you don't need them in a team just as much as you need me. But in this particular situation, that wasn't the issue. It wasn't you need to understand the ways of working of your colleagues.
Yeah.
It was just, this is toxic. And so while there are things I learned, I also think that one of the things I learned is you can't solve every problem, and sometimes you need to know when to step away.
Yeah, that's true. I think stepping away when it's not working for you is just as important as stepping into something that is. I think saying no is just as important as saying yes, which is something that we've touched on in another podcast episode. But I think that's a really good point. We were talking about inclusivity earlier, and I want to kind of come back to that and talk about that from the perspective of not just being a woman, but you also mentioned to me in a conversation before we started recording age.
I feel like we're old friends at this point.
Yeah, I know. We spoke about this ages ago. I think both of those, obviously, any industry, there's going to be elements of that, but in dentistry in particular, both in the role of the dentist, but then also hygienists, therapists, dental nurses, majority women, right? And there's going to be lots of women, and there are lots of women who are stepping up into leadership roles, owning a practice, and we're seeing more of that, and it's fantastic. And there's a lot of support and advocacy for this within dentistry, but that doesn't come without its challenges. How have you, I mean, you must have had numerous obstacles in your career that you've had to kind of sidestep or step over or overcome. As a woman, how have you got around the barriers that you've faced on this side of things, like that kind of gender barrier, if you will?
I think, as a rule, I've learned to see the beauty in being underestimated and then being able to over-deliver against those expectations.
Nice.
And because that's just how it is.
Yeah.
In my experience, 9 times out of 10, it's been assumed that I will not be adding value to a room. And then there's been shock, horror, surprise, and it's been massively to my benefit that I have been able to add value. And it's been assumed that my male colleagues will be adding value to the room, whether they do or they don't. And if I'd dwelt on the unfairness of that, I just wouldn't have got anywhere.
Yeah.
I also think, and you know, you can speak to some people I work with and they're like, oh, this relentless optimism she has. But I also do think there is an element of privilege to being able to pave the way for other people. And so one of my whole things has been, as long as I am not being damaged, right? As long as my mental health is not being damaged, as long as somebody is not doing something that is causing me harm, if I can suck it up and press on, then that is the fastest way for me to get into a position of influence in order to be able to change things for the people who come through so that they don't have to go through that.
So kind of like walking through a field of long grass, you're the one with the machete or the whatever you want to call it, cutting the grass down so there's a path there for the people who come after. It's that you take, I don't know, pride in being that person.
And I don't want, I was in a situation once, we were talking about International Women's Day, and there were 4 kind of senior women in the conversation, and 2 of them said, I don't believe in International Women's Day. One of them said, I really believe in International Women's Day. And I went, yeah, do you know what? It doesn't really do anything for me, but I really want to support it because it does do a lot for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then 2 of them went, I don't care about it. And I said, why don't you care about it? And they went, well, we had to go at it the hard way. Why shouldn't everyone else? I just could not be further from agreeing with that perspective. That just seems absolutely bonkers.
These were women.
These were women, yeah, speaking about other women. And I just don't agree with that. I don't believe we should all have everything handed to us on a plate. I think that, having to learn, having to overcome obstacles is really healthy. But I do think that we need to get to a point where these just outrageous assumptions are not made. And I mean, I've been in situations where I've been the most senior person in the room. I've been ignored for the entire meeting. My number 2 has been asked to take the decision at the end by another organisation we're partnered with, and he's had to turn around and go, it's not my decision, it's Katie's. And then they've gone, oh. And when you say, why did you think it would be his decision? The only answer they can possibly have is because he's a guy and he looks older than you. I've been in situations where I was one of 2 managing partners in an organisation. The other one, amazing human, a guy, 8 years older than me. I think it's 7.5 in case you're listening. Someone came in and assumed I was his PA. And again, he turned around and went, but why? And the only answer they could possibly give was either the fact I was wearing a skirt or the fact that I'm female or my age. And these things, I could give you examples weekly. I can give you examples of being objectified. I can give you examples of sexual harassment. I can give you so many examples. And one of the things I would like to share that I think is really important is I used to get through when it was happening to me by just being really robust. I would turn everything into a, people would make inappropriate comments and I would say, oh no, I'm all right, thank you.
Okay.
And they were so taken aback that they just stopped. Or, somebody once asked me if I could help him find his hotel room at a work event. And I said, yeah, it's no problem. You just look at the numbers on the little signs and you work out where yours falls and then you follow them. And to be fair, he laughed. But the thing is, I thought, okay, as long as I can bounce through and no one's causing me trouble, I'm fine. The thing that's really important that I would say to anyone out there, whether this is your future or whether it's your present of being a leader, I realised once I was in quite a senior position, not everyone grew up in the banter of the particular part of Essex I grew up in and was used to that being the currency of every day and felt they could just speak up for themselves. And so that didn't work. That worked for me. That's not a rule. I was the exception to the rule, I think. And I suddenly realised, actually, no. They needed senior advocates, whether they be female leaders or allies, to be standing up for them. And in those rooms where a senior person from another organisation was trying to take advantage, I'm sorry, still the victim, still the junior person tends to be at risk. And they're worried, well, what if I'm blamed for losing the business? What if this person lies about me? What about their position of authority and all of their contacts? And it's much easier for an ally to defend them than it is to defend yourself.
I think that's a really good point to make. I think many women feel that it's on women to make the change and or they feel reluctant to lean on people who might not, who are men, also fellow senior colleagues, but it's that we all need to work together, right? It's for women to be protected just as a person, not just like women need protecting, but for women to not be subject to some of the things that you've described just then, it needs to be a group effort, because the change, you know, we're 50% of the population. You can't change with if you're not the majority, and the majority means including everybody in that sort of battle, if you will. So I think that point is a really good one to make, and I think it's an important one for business owners and practice owners in dentistry to bear in mind, that this is actually a genuinely important thing to talk about and discuss and support. And it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, where you have people doing it because it's sort of what they feel they should be doing, but they don't actually understand why they're doing it, and that why that you described earlier, it needs to be understood, and we all need to be discussing it, because it affects us all. People think it doesn't, but it does.
And I also believe that while I do subscribe when it comes to doing something bad, that we should be judging impact, not intention. So someone can come and go, oh, but I didn't mean, like I didn't want to hurt her feelings.
Yeah.
I just thought, you know, she might like to be propositioned. No, let's judge the impact. Let's listen to the person who's being impacted. Yeah. However, what I would say is, when someone's clearly trying to do something right, try and judge them on the intention, not the impact. Because in my experience, when you can see someone is trying to do something right and they don't necessarily get it right, they're also really open to a conversation.
I think that's really important, and I think we are getting to a point now where a lot of the time we're quite quick to say you're wrong and this is why, but you're right to differentiate between the two. They're open to discussion. For me personally, when people, you know, I could talk about this all day, but obviously we are brought up in a gendered society, and so we have these patterns of thinking that are ingrained in us. Both men and women all have these thoughts, and it's not necessarily an individual's fault that they think like that, because everything in society tells you that that's how it is. So you've got to challenge it yourself, so you can kind of forgive the ignorance, if you will. What I feel in everything is the ignorance I can forgive. They just need to be willing to learn and to be better. It's when people resist that's when I'm like, that's where sort of the respect for the situation is out the window. If people are, okay, I don't understand this, but please help me too. I'm all over that, because we don't all know everything.
Asking questions is so important.
Yeah.
Also, people who are consistent. So I don't care if you say the right thing to me, to my face. If as soon as I'm not in the room, you're saying the wrong thing, then, you know, you might as well say the wrong thing to my face. Whereas someone who says the wrong thing when I'm not in the room and when I'm in the room, at least they might be open to being educated.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, you know, I worked in a big organisation once with a guy who was older than me in the team, really nice man. We became friends. But when I first started, he used to like make casually, accidentally misogynistic comments the whole time.
Okay.
And I was like, oh. But I chose not to say anything, and that was my decision.
Yeah.
And then two of my colleagues, one of them picked up on the same thing. One of them picked up that one of my colleagues was Mexican, and he picked up on the fact that there was some cultural misappropriation that he didn't appreciate. Anyway, these two colleagues went to HR, complained about the guy making the comments, and they said, oh, they'd heard him doing it to me too. So could HR call me? So HR called me, and they were like, right, we're going to go into a disciplinary. And I said, can I just check before we do this that he understands what's going on? Because if he's disciplined, even if he's fired, he's just going to go out into the world exactly the same as he currently is.
Yeah.
So he and I had a meeting together later that day. He's about 15 years older than me, maybe 20. And I said to him after the meeting, could I have a chat, please? And he was like, yeah, no worries. And I said, look, I'm not going to say who, but I've been approached about a complaint to do with some of the things you say. And to be honest, I agree. But I just wanted to have the conversation with you first. Anyway, he was horrified.
Yeah.
We had a really long conversation. I went home. He texted me that evening. He said, I've just got home. I've spoken to my wife. I've told her what I've been saying. She's turned around. She can't believe that I've been saying these things. I had no bad intentions. She's told me I need to apologize to everyone. And honestly, he not only changed the way he was behaving, and if he wasn't sure, asked, he actually became an ally. He became an advocate. And it wasn't easy sitting there face to face with him, because trust me, there are just as many people who would have turned around and said, this is none of your business. I do whatever I want to do.
Of course.
But I felt that my obligation was to be able to have the conversation and in good faith know that if I then went to HR, it was because I felt he was irredeemable between him and me.
Absolutely.
But the human connection was the thing that had to come first.
I think that's a really a good anecdote and story to kind of finish the conversation on, because I think surrounding this topic there's a lot of negativity. I don't really like that word, but a lot of hopelessness, I guess. And it's really, I get it, I do. You know, sometimes you can feel like you're just, you know, hitting a brick wall. I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not getting through to people and why they need to care and why these comments aren't helpful or kind or making me feel safe and respected. But it's important to talk about these instances too, because whilst there are going to be people who won't listen, there are going to be some that will, and that's important to bear in mind. And I think if we can go forward and feel confident to have these discussions with people and have that transparency, it does hopefully encourage a nice environment both within and outside the workplace. So
I totally agree. Just my closing thought would be try and see things that are different as an opportunity, not a threat.
I like that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was a wonderful conversation, super relevant to those tuning in today. Very, very topical within dentistry, and we've run loads of articles about this within the practice and within business. And I think actually having a podcast episode on this topic will be really, really helpful for the audience. So I appreciate your insight.
I appreciate you having me in. I'm very dependent on my dentist.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Thanks.